Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session today. One more webinar session here at Voltimum. And today we have the Scolmore presenting the session with us, with Jake Green and Tim Binstead with us. Welcome, guys.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. And for the people who's in the room already, just a couple of tips that we always recommend you guys to use the browser Google Chrome to have a good experience here. We are going to share the screen with the slide in a couple of seconds. And if you have any troubles or any technical issues to visualize the slides, you can change the browser to Google Chrome. That probably in your technical issues will be fixed. And yeah, let me share then the screen, Jake. It's already done. So your slide, your first slide, it's in the screen already. And good presentation for you guys.
Thank you very much. It seems a little bit weird because I can't actually see what's being shared on the screen, but I'm trusting the process and I'm trusting that it's going to work. So
it's looking good. It's looking good to me, Jake.
Oh, good. There we go. That's all right then. At least we can. At least you can see it anyway, Tim. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. As always, here at the Scolmore Group, we're going to be talking about something technical. And we just want to thank you for your time, first and foremost. And hopefully you'll learn a little bit today about TM66 and the circular economy of lighting. We've got a few slides to go through today. And myself and Tim will be chipping in along the way. It's something that's quite interesting at the moment, isn't it, Tim? It's not something that's coming directly to maybe contractors, but we're certainly seeing it at a level where people are now sort of selecting their products based on this TM66, the technical memorandum from SIBSI and LIA in combination with each other.
Yeah.
Probably the first question or the first place to start, Tim, was really to work out what it is, what we're doing, and how it's going to affect maybe contractors in the future.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jake. I think with TM66, it's like a lot of these things, it's a starter for 10. And it's to get the industry thinking about the nature of how do we design out waste and how do we design in the ability to reuse, remake, rather than simply taking product and ending it up in landfill. And so what we're finding, of course, is that then the key people that sit within, shall we say, the key audience for TM66 becomes manufacturers, absolutely, but it also is specifiers and clients and designers looking at saying, look, we need to make an impact here. And rather than having products that simply come in and end up in landfill, we need to be thinking better about design, manufacture of products, along with, you know, how it's delivered, how it's transported across the oceans, whether you're looking at it's being created in countries where they're using coal-fired rather than renewable, and all of that sort of gets mixed up into the process.
Yeah, I think we certainly we do a lot of talking at consultant practices, and we sort of, the question seems to be asked at the moment is all around embodied carbon as well, Tim. Maybe that's something that we can touch upon on another webinar at some point. But you know, it's an interesting point. Again, we see a lot of customers saying that they want the brightest lights, and having the brightest lights, whilst it may seem good for us for the start of it, it's something that we need to understand whether we can reuse the fittings that we're moving from place to place instead of just getting brighter and brighter all the time. We also probably want to touch on, Tim, the circadian rhythm of lighting as well at some point. Maybe that's something we can discuss.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of these things, isn't it, where if you get the right design, just going brighter sort of falls away. If you think about what it is you want your lighting to do, the effect you want it to create. I mean, you know me, Jake. I'm old enough. to know when all you needed to do was to whap in enough fluorescent luminaires and get the right level of light, and it was happy days. But now, with the level of complexity and the range of means of delivering light with LEDs and so on, then there's much more flexibility and much more creativity allowed for in the design. And to be honest, it's sort of one of those things where if TM66 hadn't come in 2001, it would have had to come soon in terms of getting manufacturers to think about these things.
Okay. So then, just to give you a quick overview, really, of the current state of play, the estimate is 2.2 billion tons, Tim, of waste. And the electronic waste has increased by 47%. So it's quite clear that we need to do something before this sort of escalates up until, where we're just sort of getting into this habit or this buying culture where we just buy new all the time and instead of repurposing something maybe or redeveloping the internals. We see it time and time again, particularly with lighting, where we could actually reuse the housing of the fitting. We just need to change the internals. Again, if it is a plastic fitting, we could potentially save some wastage or some stuff that's going to landfill sites just by replacing the internals.
And the model, as it's detailed on the slide there, is very clear. The first model is what we, shall we say, what we currently have pre TM66. It's take, make, and lob. And you and I both know that lob sent to landfill. You and I both know that too often, it's cheaper and easier to actually function with this model in many ways.
It is indeed, and I think the pelters will come, particularly at manufacturers at some point as well. We've all been in that situation where we've had to replace an LED driver, and it's not easy to obtain the exact driver that was once there. People, technology, products move on. It's not easy to sort of get hold of those products. But I think what this is trying to achieve, Tim, correct me if I'm mistaken here, is that it's trying to make sure that manufacturers like ourselves are keeping spares for a number of years to make sure that there is serviceable parts that could be replaced at some point.
It certainly sits in there. And sort of moving on to this slide, what we're looking at here is the recognition that we've started to move into this where we are seeking to recycle. And that's a good thing. It means there's less product goes into landfill. The problem is you've still got a lot of stuff that's guaranteed to go into landfill. And the circular economy, still looks at this and goes, we've added a bit of a wiggle in here, the recycling bit into this linear line, if you like, but it's still not ideal. It's still not driving stuff back in. It's still not minimizing the amount of stuff that's being dug out of the ground to any great extent. And so we still need to be thinking better. And TM66, shall we say, is that starter for saying, and we can think better about that.
I mean, it's, just on a bit of a side note here, even when I was back at school, they were talking about this reuse and recycle, and yet we're still seeing an increase. What do you think the main culprit is for not recycling things? Not even just lighting in general. I know I'm going off piece a little bit here, but just anything in general. We see it done very well with the waste bins now. You've got the two separate bins. It's just, I don't understand how we're still increasing the waste. Is it because we are just genuinely using more?
I think there's a sense of that. I also think culturally there's a change. This is going back a while. I still remember as a young electrician going out to a farm and an old farmer, because they were always very generous with their stuff, would have kept some old gear from years and years from even before that. I vaguely remember one farmer bringing out something from the 1940s asking if I could use it still. That sense, well, and the answer was no, or hell no. But the thing is, stuff manufacturers done a fantastic job across the piece of making good stuff cheaper. Whereas you go back far enough, good stuff was expensive.
True.
And because good stuff is cheaper now, it's still then that balance point at which repair and recycle, you lose the balance point of when it becomes economical to do that. And I think it's sort of an element of that sits in that manufacturers have done too well.
Yeah.
You know, you get a good product, it's thing, and it's relatively cheap by historical standards.
Indeed. So, Ellen MacArthur Foundation, Tim. This sort of just
don't want to
really
talk
symbolises everything that goes into you know, the manufacturing, the way that it comes across, the recycling, the finite materials we can see there as well.
Yeah. I mean, this TM66 uses this model, hence, and we have got permission to use it from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. This looks at what is in essence the circular economy, and it looks at it in its totality. Shall we say, if you look at the right-hand side, that's quite technical. If you look at the left-hand side, it's quite, shall we say, biological. But the implication of use is such that if you were to ignore the things that come back and feed in, but simply just went straight through from digging it out of the ground to throwing it away, you are guaranteed to be using an excessive amount of product for no good reason, when it can be recycled, when it can be reinserted back into that whole process. And so the Ellen MacArthur Foundation use this within their education side. And again, CIBSE within TM66 use it as well to actually get people, particularly when we're looking at the right-hand side of the, shall we say, butterfly diagram. They call it a butterfly diagram. And this sits right in the middle of what we as manufacturers and what specifiers should be thinking about in terms of the circular economy.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm sorry, I'm just taking a closer look, really.
Yeah. I'm just looking at my other screen because it's much bigger, and therefore I can see it. But you get the sense, if you look down at the bottom where it talks about collection user, then there's an immediate feedback into sharing. It can be, you don't remanufacture, you don't do anything, you just say, look, I've finished using it, do you want it? And so you've got an immediate reuse of a thing. You've got the next one up is you maintain it, prolong it. So there's maintenance that kicks in, that you do something that ensures, and you're then there, you're feeding it back into a service provider, but it's still not gone into landfill. The next one out is reuse and redistribute. So it's feeding back into the cycle and feeding back into the system. And then the final one, if you like, is recycle. So you strip it down, but you're not stripping it down and sending it into landfill. You're actually feeding it back into the manufacture process of various parts. And there is actually, BSI have just published a remanufacture standard.
Okay.
And I've forgotten the number, and I should be better, but I have forgotten the number, so apologies there.
You're forgiven. It's only just been released, so
yeah. So I mean, but it's a sign of the times. I think that's the bit. It's a sign of the times, of the direction of travel. That, you know, I've never imagined that we would have a standard on the remanufacture of product.
Yeah, it's. I think it's just a mindset, isn't it? It's one of those there, you know. And I'm sure you mentioned sort of the farmer there, Tim. I'm sure as electricians we're known for it. You know, the amount of people that I speak to that say, "Oh yeah, you know, I've got an old set of breakers in the garage," or "I've got collected some screws from an old job," or, you know, bits and pieces like that. We as electricians, I'd suggest that we're actually pretty good at it. I think the problem is them pushing that onto the consumers or the customer that's ordering the works, to say, like, you know, we're going to refurb this office maybe.
Yeah.
we can reuse some of these fittings. All these fittings are gold. Sorry, not gold. They're good. You can reuse them. You can just put them in a store cupboard or something like that instead of actually just saying, right, we're going to take them away, then we're going to recycle them. Let's think about it in a better way, I suppose, is the way to look at it.
Yeah, and I mean that's absolutely right, Jake. I think it is one of those things where education is going to become a key factor in this, but we're also getting where you're going to find specifiers are just going to be saying to contractors, perhaps larger contractors, look, we want you selecting products that is embedded within the circular economy. And so, I mean, it's for Scolmore, for Avaya, it's enlightened self-interest to engage with it, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm sure we're going to get onto that part in a moment where we talk about Avaya itself and where it's at. But this particular diagram has come from the European Parliament Research Service, as you can see at the bottom there. And again, this is very similar to that butterfly diagram, but it just outlines it probably a little bit clearer, Tim, I'd suggest, where it breaks it down into sections of how it comes into it, and making sure that following it round from raw materials all the way around to waste management. Making sure that we are at every single point within that circle thinking about how we are using lighting.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. I think that's it. And you notice that in the waste management bit, that maximizing the waste management to then refeed it back into the sustainable design and the idea of the designer making use of that becomes a critical thing.
Yeah, I mean, we can see there we've got some residual waste. That's not to say that we need to make sure that we reuse the light fitting to its 100% capacity, because it's never going to happen. The reason that people are replacing light fittings are either because they're either old or discoloured, or the I was going to say ballast has gone. Then the driver's gone, or somewhere along them lines. We're always going to see some sort of residual wastage from there. I remember times when LEDs were sort of, not to say first coming onto the market, but when they started making the replacement for the fluorescent lights, where you had to rewire the ballast and put the driver in and put the new end caps in. That type of thinking is where we're at.
Yeah, although it's interesting, I just see there that Rob Smith talked to, shall we say, a level of frustration in the audience chat, Jake. Replaced 100 circular bulkheads, but the frustrations of not being able to swap the innards. Yeah, I get your frustration, Rob. It's exactly the point I think Jake's just made, isn't it?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know, Rob, was it a old compact fluorescent style, or was it an LED setup? If it's an old compact fluorescent, I'll probably forgive it. But if it is an LED one, then that's what we're trying to drive here, is to make sure that when we are using LED, because I know the technology moves on, but we're in an era now where LEDs are commonplace and they are so easy to replace.
Yeah.
So, if 100 circular bulkheads in a college could have been at a compact fluorescence, or get the lamps, I mean, the technology is moving on. Hopefully, fingers crossed, now we're not going to see something like an LED revolution again for a number of years, because they are so effective. So that's probably why it's not taken off, Tim, in terms of it being around so long ago. We've now got the technology now down. We now know how much energy we can drive through one LED.
Yeah. No, absolutely. In fact, primarily, I suspect, really, with the LED, the real key element there is the nature of the longevity of the drivers, more than the lamps themselves.
Yeah, I mean, we're always going to see those lights fail at some point. We believe that the efficiency of them is right up there at the moment. But we're always going to see it with mass-made products. There's always going to be some point of failure at some point. That's not to say that we're sort of shying away from the fact that there may be a failure, of course, but with the amount that is being produced currently, it's very difficult for manufacturers to get 100%.
Yeah.
Work with the manufacturer to future-proof the works. Usually a gear tray can be swapped out for an LED tray and driver. Yeah, it's an interesting point, Andrew. We've tried to keep one of our fittings the same in terms of the dimensions and the actual housing, just because we want to make sure that people can come back to us again and again if they do have any problems or they're trying to upgrade their lighting with the same structure on the LED driver, the PCB that the LEDs sit on there. We've done that on purpose because we know that this is sort of an issue as well.
Yeah. And so when we've got...
Go on.
Sorry, Jake, go on.
I was just going to say, so TM66 then, Tim, is... we've briefly outlined it, but it is covering the principles, really, of designing lighting, whether that's lighting on either Relux or Dilux, or from our point of view, designing a light.
Yeah, and it's in a sense, it also provides in TM66 something that is measurable, and so it's not simply saying these are all great ideas. You know, you think about the client, you think about the product designer, you think about the manufacturers, you think about the specifiers and the installers, and that's right and proper. But for both manufacturers and specifiers, it provides measurable, verifiable assessments that allows you to think through those things more carefully. And TM66, shall we say, gains its usefulness because of that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we're going to take a quick look into some of the calculations and some of the ways that that we can obtain the TM66 mark against some of our products in a moment.
Yeah.
As we've said already, make, use, reuse, remake, and recycle. The 3 REs would probably be the way to sum it up.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right, and that really is the heart of TM66. And this is where the key bit is really for us as manufacturers. This sits very much squarely on the manufacturer side. Design is critical, and without, it's not only good design providing a product that the user wants, because what's the point in having something that's absolutely fantastic that nobody buys? You know, it's got to be at a price point that people accept. It's got to produce the type of light effect that people need. It's got to, all of the things that happen with all lighting design has to still happen. But you then embed into that a designer's way of looking at resources, manufacture, and so on and so forth, that's detailed there on the slide.
Andrew's just raised a really, really good point, saying I think this comes full circle to valued engineering.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, absolutely, it's a valid point. You know, I'm just trying to think about that training, Tim, that we did a little while ago with SIBS, and them talking about the use of valued engineering. It's an interesting concept, isn't it? That someone is design and build. We look at it that way, but actually it's design and build it in the same sentence. And value engineering, yes, it does have its place, but the way that the industry needs to be looking at it more so is it's set out in a design and then it's built. It's value engineering, yes, whilst it's got a place, is costing lots of time and energy for consultants, going backwards and forwards.
And actually, then the mindset has to be within TM66 is shall we say, from the designer's point of view, is how do we actually retain the value of the luminaire for longer?
Mm-hmm.
And if you keep that in mind, then the issues perhaps around value engineering are not merely at the price point of installation.
Yeah, I'd love to agree with you, but everybody knows that on a design, the bottom line is the crucial part. Nobody ever sees it, that when it, I've had this chat time and time again, and I know we're going off on a bit of a tangent here, but I think it's a good point, is that at the front end costs, they want it to be as cheap as possible.
Yeah.
When it comes out of the final piece, no one sort of looks at the bottom line and then goes, we've actually made a loss on that. Well, if you use those products to start with, then you wouldn't have had this cost right at the end. But we digress. Rob's just said, disposing of waste is costly. Replacing 2x2 fluorescents with 600x600 LED panels had quotes for legal disposal of 70 units, £1,300. Wow, that's very expensive. Maybe you should get in contact with your local wholesaler. Again, I did a massive LED refit some years ago now when we arranged with a national wholesaler that we could take our products to them and they would recycle it for us.
Part of the problem with that, of course, Jake, will be the fact that it was fluorescents, and so that mercury vapor, they have to be crushed a certain way, and so costs kick in.
They do, but the wholesalers are pretty good at supporting their customers with that as well. But yeah, they'll take them away. They'll put them in the wee containers. They call them coffins. They'll take them away and then go from there.
Right. Okay.
So,
good.
Moving on swiftly. This is one of the assessments, Tim.
Yes. So we have the you can see there's a circular economy assessment method. It is, as I said before, a methodology that exists for both manufacturers and specifiers. So there's two spreadsheets, make and specify. Obviously, for Avaya, it's make is the spreadsheet that's dealt with, and whilst we as a manufacturer would fill this in, and it would spit out a score that then is externally verified by the LIA, the Lighting Industry Association, and it's only then that you get awarded your particular score.
Yeah. So just to give you a bit of background, then, some of the products that are within our range under the Inceptor range, majority of them have been through the process of TM66, and what that comprises of is designing a light fitting, then actually stripping it back down and taking note of every individual component that sits inside that light fitting, and then chucking it into this assessment to make sure that we are on the right path when we come to reusability or recyclable materials that we see inside the fitting. Yeah.
And so when you come to the next slide, Jake, then within make, there are, as you picked up on there's four key areas of product design, manufacturing, materials, and the ecosystem. And again, that bit, as you say, is broken down across the whole piece, covering all of those four key areas. And then you get a score. Yeah.
Now the scoring, Tim. You know, people. I would imagine people will look at it and go, "Well, it's either TM66 or it's not," which is not the case. You know, there are always going to be components within light fittings where you simply cannot get them to the level that is required by the assessment.
Yeah.
You know, unless you are literally 3D printing every single light fitting and you're using components that are sort of accessible continuously, it's very difficult to, as you can see on the right hand side there, to get to the 2.5 to 4.
Yeah. I mean, the industry couldn't afford it, Jake.
No.
People would not buy the product because they couldn't afford it. It would not be economically viable in the current state of play. And we have to be honest about that, and we have to recognise where we're at. But I think this model allows for progress to be measured. And so where are you at now? What's the direction of travel of your business in terms of manufacture? And then how can you make it better?
Yeah. So a question for you then, Tim. If you was a specifier, I'm going to put you on the spot here. What area would you look at? You can see the 4 different colours that we've got there.
Yeah.
Is it a case of, no, I want excellent circularity, or do you want to sit in the middle somewhere where you go, do you know what, that's acceptable? You've taken some considerations. We can get some of the parts again. We can reuse them.
Yeah.
Or, you know, do you want to be at that top end?
Yeah. No, I think if I'm a specifier, one, I want to know that as a manufacturer that I'm going to specify, that you're at least thinking about it. The fact is that you as a business have committed to looking at the circular economy and applying some of the principles that are embedded within TM66. I think that's a good starting point, because no business that's trying to dip their toe in are going to waste their time and money doing that. You're going to have to either say, yes, we are engaged with it. So as a specifier, I want to know that a business is engaged with this and is honest with it. So it says, look, this is where we're at. It's not as good as we want it to be, but this is where we can see progress from these earlier fittings that were perhaps, they might only be, I'm looking at the score on this more at home here, that might only be in the around about a 1 or 1.5. You go, well, okay, but at least you've measured it.
Yeah.
What is it that you're doing to move it into the next section? You know, what are the processes that you're engaged with, so that the next time I come to you, you're in the yellow bit. And so I'm not looking for, I think as a specifier, it'd be unfair and inappropriate to say, unless it pings into the green, you know, we're not doing it, simply because I don't think there's any manufacturer that sits in the 2.5 to 4.
I think there may be one, and that was probably someone that's 3D printing light fittings.
Right.
But
so it's incredibly difficult then. But if you're looking at, I would be looking at something in the heading towards the yellow, and I'd be a pretty happy bunny.
And if you was a contractor, then maybe I guess this is down to individuals, really. But would you be selecting your fittings based on this, or you know, is it very much a case of you've got to have that want to care about the environment and the wastage?
I think I would pull it into, you're always going to be looking at a range of things. You want a certain type of light level, you want a certain type of light, and it's certainly got to have a certain appearance because of the aesthetics of the thing as well. But this comes into the mix now, and it becomes shall we say, another critical part of the mix for any product. And so you would simply then say, well, you're not engaged with this process. I'll look at other manufacturers around there that are engaged, and that would provide me therefore with other options that perhaps exist out there that give me something similar. Okay.
Just a couple of more bits that have come through here. I'll go for a 10-year guarantee at the end of life manufacturer for compatible parts. Love you to elaborate a little bit more on that. I think what you sort of alluding to there is that we as manufacturers would take some parts back. So let's say that he was replacing it, we would take some parts back so that we could reuse them maybe. And Ian's put in the bottom there, execution failure of all these principles at the foot of the costing quantity surveyors. Yeah. I mean, look, we can't possibly comment on the quantity surveyors. What we do know, though, is that there is provisions being put in there for this value engineering. So they generally go in at the higher end, and then it gets valued engineering down, because they know that the on cost by the time it gets to the end of the project, they're going to have to shave some money off somewhere.
And at which point, Jake, it then becomes the issue of the specifier insisting on saying, no, we require a score within this band.
So yeah, we're almost going back to design and build. So the whole value and engineering thing would become obsolete, because the design front has got all of the on costs sat in it.
Yeah.
And then it's being built.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay.
I mean, the next slide is shall we say, just putting it out there in a wee bit easier light to see exactly what we mean by the particular scores that are sitting there.
So 0, no evidence.
Yeah.
It's highly unlikely that anybody is going to be getting a 0, because if you're engaged with the process and you're going through that particular system with the LIA, there will be some evidence. To achieve sort of the outstanding and the excellent at the top end, you can see there that aligned yourself with the circular economy completely.
Yeah. I think the other bit though is perhaps it might be that if a manufacturer's just getting into it and they're looking at some existing product and they were looking at, well, what does this score? You may find that they have around about a 1 anyway, simply because, you know, they're inadvertently, without thinking about it, it probably drops into something around that sort of figure anyway. But then when you properly look at the design, it should move really quite quickly forward into the high 1s and low 2s as a starter for 10.
So we mentioned very briefly that some of our products are going in there. I'm not going to go and emphasize too much on this because we don't want to make it about a sales pitch. But just to let you know that we can see on the middle of the screen there where you've got the Avaya logo just to the right, you can see that these do come with a TM66 logo as well that we placed on the boxes or in the literature. And our Inceptor Milli downlight, the new one out, has gone through the process as well. So I'm not going to sort of labour the point too much on that.
No.
This is just to show that we have the certification. It is backed by SIBSI and the LIA, as we've already shown there. It will give you a detailed breakdown. We can provide you with this certification if you are looking to sort of push this to your specifiers, or if you are a specifier, we can provide you with this as well. Is there anything else you want to say on that, Tim?
No, I think that's exactly right. The verifiability is critical. It's pointless us manufacturers saying, yes, we're on the road, we're doing this process, we're engaged with it, and we're patting ourselves on the back. And I think it's right and proper that there is an external confirmation of the score we've given ourselves to say, yes, this is reasonable, this is verifiable, this is something that you can put that stamp on. And so just in terms of any manufacturer, if you've got the LIA SIB stamp, then it is telling you something, and then there will be a certificate that sits behind that particular product.
I think the other thing to sort of not be concerned with, but also to think about, is it another certificate for certificate's sake? Is it one of those ones where you've got a mark to say that you're involved in it? And I don't think that that's what it's trying to achieve, but I'd love to see what your opinion is of that particular logo is, Tim.
Yeah, no, I think if you have a look at the spreadsheet that sits there, in terms of the CEAM spreadsheet, it is quite involved. There's quite a bit of detail that manufacturers and specifiers are required to put in there, and so no, I think it does have meaning. Like with everything, this is its first iteration. I'm not saying it can't be improved. I don't know where that sits at the moment, but until there are quite a few manufacturers out there engaging with it, TM66 won't be updated, because they need to work out where the wrinkles are. But as a starter, as a way of engaging with the process, it is a good starter. And so, no, I don't think it's a gimme, if you like. I think it's better than that, just as a general principle.
I don't know the answer to this question, but do you know if there's anywhere where people can see a list of manufacturers that are engaging with TM66?
Don't know. I suspect you'd have to get in touch with the LIA. They would maintain a thing. I'll have a chat with them on Friday when I'm down there.
Okay. We'll keep people posted of that as well via our social media channels. We do know that there are quite a few others sort of looking into this, and we do know that there's a few people that are acting already. We've had a look at some of their fittings, and we believe most of them sit in the same sort of range as what we do as well. So next steps then, Tim. I think the second point really is where we need to be headed. For me.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, Jake. I think unless not just specifiers and manufacturers, but the whole industry engages with it, then it fails. and we lose sight of the fact that the lighting industry is massive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is a major producer of waste, and therefore, if that part of our industry doesn't engage, there are fundamental problems in trying to sort of move things forward. So yeah, that change in thinking becomes critical.
I mean, incentives there probably ties in with the way that Andrew was talking in the comments section, saying about a 10-year guarantee. That could be one of the ways. You know, maybe we could even look at exchanging the PCBs. Maybe that's something that we need to do as a manufacturer and just come up with a bit of a scheme to actually incentivize people to come in. Or everybody loves a discount. I'm probably going to get told off by my bosses now to offer a discount, but we could do that as well. And I think as well, we've got to take responsibility, haven't we? That's ultimately what we've got to do. We've got to make sure that when we are looking at doing lighting replacements, if you're doing survey on existing buildings, making sure that you go around and say, well, okay, well, we see that you need a whole set of replacement lights. You want to keep it all the same. Let's do something with the current setup. Can we reuse that somewhere? Whether it's some store cupboards, even if it's 10%, that 10% over the course of the next year will be greatly appreciated by the waste disposable people, I'm sure.
No, absolutely, Jake. But there you go. The next steps. They're the list that I sort of drew up just to get people thinking about it. It only, like I said, TM66 only was published in 2021. It's relatively early days, but we are seeing movement, and that's a good thing. And so clearly an element of education and a change of thinking is already happening. And it needs to continue to feed through.
I don't want to really press too much on this point either, but we can see that we've got corporate objectives. I don't want to sort of get into a debate about that, but again, that may be something that people are leaning towards when they are selecting their fittings. They may look at that and go, well, how does that affect us and our green credentials as a business? I think that's probably all I'm going to say on that point.
So, I mean, Jay, that comes to pretty much the end of our presentation, but I noticed we've got a couple of questions in the questions side. So Philip just pointed out that it's applicable to highway lighting luminaires, absolutely. And then Mike's question is, would the lighting industry agree on form factor of key components? This would allow products to be serviced far more easily and parts swapped out. I think that inherently is problematical, isn't it, Jake?
It would be.
I mean, in many ways, it's a bit like if you pick up a consumer unit, we know that circuit breakers for different manufacturers are all designed to 60898, but you can't ask any manufacturer to accept somebody else's circuit breaker in their consumer unit simply because the warranty breaks down.
It's an interesting concept, that's for sure. However, what I will say is, then, just going back to your point there with the breakers, it comes down to legal proceedings. It just wouldn't happen. What I do know, Mike, is that actually we as a manufacturer, again, I know we've been talking about all of our products, but we've started to look at modularity of the fittings as well. So it's not a case of, if let's say an emergency pack failed, you can just click it in and out of the fitting. Or if the battery failed, you can just click it in and out. The sensor, for argument's sake, is a clicking, and on the little Molex plugs, you can unplug them, put a new one in. It's not a case of having to strip the whole fitting down. They're very easy to just click in and out, and that's something that we're sort of focusing on heavily at the moment here at the Scolmore Group and Avaya.
So, I suppose it's any questions that people have, any thoughts on what's been discussed?
Andrew's put different buzz bars. Again, that's an interesting point. They don't want you to use different buzz bars. Again, it's just making sure that we as an organisation have got ourselves covered should something go wrong. That's not to say that our product's inferior or another manufacturer. It's just keeping that separation between the two of us is the main point there.
Yeah.
Hopefully you found that useful. If there's no further questions, then we'll sort of shut off for this evening.
Yeah.
What we will say, we've just got one. Here we go.
Yeah.
Zyger
The Zaga standards. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's right, Neil.
If they are to the standard, there you go.
Yeah.
And maybe that's something that we will take a look at in a bit more detail now.
Yeah.
What I was just going to say before we answer that final question is, feel free to get in contact with us. Keep loading your questions up on Voltimum. Feel free to get in contact with us via social media if you've got any questions, or drop a call into the technical helpline, and they'll only be too happy to help you. And please do check some of our fittings out. Like I said, I'm not going to labour the point on the sales, but feel free, if you need us to come and do any more CPDs for you guys, then please feel free to get in contact with us on that as well.
Yeah.
Andrew just said, would that affect any warranty?
Potentially, but we'd need to look at it, Andrew. I think that's the answer. It's I would, as Jake mentioned, it's the issues around the legals, shall we say. So potentially at the moment in the world that we live in, quite probably, but there would need to be some further discussions in-house and broader in the industry.
Yeah. Okay, if there's no further questions, we'll wrap things up tonight. Again, we really appreciate your time. There's 45 or 46 people on tonight. So again, really appreciate it. Thanks guys for tuning in, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one.
Yeah, pass you back to Alexander.
Okay, guys, thanks very much. Thanks, team. Thanks, Jake, for your presentation today with us. And thanks all for your attendance today. And stay tuned to our next communications and to our following webinar sessions. Take care, guys.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Take care, folks.